What are expenses for a business? We're going to answer that question in this video. Okay, so we're asking ourselves, what are expenses for a business? Expenses are basically things, I'm going to just simplify it, that take your money out of the business banking account. Simple, right? Things like rent, things like your payroll, taxes, utilities, insurance, supplies, necessities, whatever. Those are your expenses. So when you think about starting a business and you think about how much money you'll actually make, that's a big question, because a lot of people say, hey, my business made $1 million last year. And when I ask them, I say, what do you mean it made $1 million last year? They say, it made $1 million last year. Well, was that your sales? Or was that your actual take-home money? How much money you paid yourself? Because when I hear the word made $1 million, I think profit. I don't think sales. Because there's plenty of businesses that do millions of dollars worth of sales every year that don't make any money. So who cares, right? There's nothing to brag about there. So great. You have figured out how to get a bunch of money to come through your business, but you personally, you and your ownership group, you've made nothing. So who cares, right? So that's the thing to look at. When somebody says, how much money did your business make? Okay, if they tell me a number that's actually their net income, which is also known as profit, that means something. So if a business hypothetically made $1 million, woo, they did really well. They did really well that year. But if a business did $1 million in sales, you have to see how much the expenses were for that year. They did $1 million in sales that year, but maybe their expenses were like $950,000. And then in the end, they only made $50,000 profit out of $1 million in sales. That's a realistic thing that happens. So the business didn't really make, so to speak, $1 million. It had gross sales of $1 million. So I would say it sold $1 million worth of product or services or whatever. But you're trying to figure out what the expenses are in a business. And it's important to understand that, because that way you're going to know exactly what you have to deduct off your sales to figure out your actual net income at the end of the year. Well, if the expenses are going to be super high, that means it's going to be super difficult potentially to get all those sales to come through. I mean, you don't want a business that's going to have heavy expenses, right? Every month that you have to pay tons of money every single month just to survive, because it's going to be increasingly difficult unless you're changing and adapting and being creative and finding new ways and new customers to bring in revenue. It's going to be difficult to meet those expenses, because the bottom line in business is this: if your expenses exceed your sales, if your expenses exceed your income, your sales, your income, same thing. If they exceed them, you're going to go out of business. The only way to keep the business going is if you have a bunch of money saved up in your bank and you want to put that money into your business so it can survive. Well, how long are you going to be willing to do that? In a sense, you're not even working for free. You're working for a loss. So you're losing all your time. You're losing all your money. That's not a business that I would be excited to be into. Now, having said that, any business you set up is going to have initial startup costs, initial expenses, same thing. Anything that you're spending out to get the business going, or reoccurring things like your power and light bill, your gas bill, your telephone bill, your rent, these are ongoing monthly expenses that you're going to have to pay every month. So you're going to have to negate those every single month by doing some sales, right? By generating some income. And if you can do that and they far exceed your expenses, you're going to make money. So each one of those expenses that I just happen to rattle off, like rent and utilities and all the different stuff, some of them are fixed, but some of them are negotiable. And it's going to be important for you as a business owner to do your best to get all those expenses as low as possible and negotiate them down so that you make the most money possible. If you don't do that, you're basically giving away your hard-earned money. And as old Ben Franklin said, a penny saved is a penny earned. So any penny, any dollar that you save every month, whatever it is, that's money that you didn't have to make to pay for that expense. So as an example, A lot of these big telephone companies that provide your internet, your phone, and all that, they've got all kinds of promotions that happen. And then they'll do like a 6-month or a 12-month promotion or something like that. And then once it falls out of that promotional period, the monthly rate actually goes up quite a bit. And if you don't call them, if you don't take the time to call them, they charge you that higher rate. Well, if you let that go on every single month, your expenses are going to be higher, right? So you're going to make less money. So that's when you would want to call them back. And so what I do for some of my businesses is every so often when we see bills spike up, we're like, what happened? We'll call them and we'll say, hey, why did our bill go up 30%? It was this much last month, now it just jumped. Say, oh, your promotional period ended. Then I'll say, well, geez, do you have any other promotional periods? Is there something else I can sign up for and get a better deal? Because that's not cool. If it was, $90 a month before, now it's $120 a month, $30 a month more. In a year, that's $360 that you're taking out of my pocket. And if you're like me, $360 at the end of the year is $360, right? And imagine if you have 5 or 10 bills like that are charging you $30 more per month, right? Now it turns out to a couple thousand or a few $1,000s a year that you could have saved or reinvested into your business or, bought some new piece of equipment or something like that, just as a result of not giving your money away. So controlling expenses is vital for your bottom line, or as you call it, profit at the end of the year. How much money you're going to take home from your business. That is very vital. So you have to control and keep your expenses low. The number one expense in business is usually your payroll. The second is usually your rent. So those are the top two. What I was trying to say earlier was your top two expenses are rent and payroll. So the rent is something before you actually, if you're going to sign a lease, let's say you've got a business and you want to go into a shopping center and you want to sign a 5-year lease, or some businesses want to be there super long term and they want to sign a 10-year lease. Well, that's the time when you can negotiate your rent. You don't have to give them their asking price. And my rule of thumb is if they're asking for a price, in most cases, they'll take a little bit less. So it's in your best interest to try to negotiate at least some, right? Save yourself some money. I mean, imagine if you signed a 10-year lease, which I don't recommend doing unless you're a very savvy, seasoned business person. I would probably err on signing the least amount of time possible and trying to negotiate in options to renew your lease, right? At the time that you're signing your lease. That's a whole nother video that we will talk about, how to negotiate a lease and different lease terms, agreements, and things that are within leases. But I would try to maybe sign like a 2-year or 3-year lease and get options that you as the tenant can actually renew, so you don't have to go to the table again once your business is established in your location. The last thing you want to do is give that landlord all that leverage, because he's going to say, well, shoot, you're established in my shopping center. You're probably not going to move because all your customers know to come here. So he's probably going to be a lot tougher to negotiate with than if you had negotiated the day before you had opened your business. So back to rent and your payroll. Those are your two biggest expenses. They can make or break your business long term. So payroll, those are your employees. Make sure when you're hiring your people that you understand that if you're hiring them and you're scheduling them to work and you're paying them by the hour, you're giving them a salary, make sure they're doing something every day they come in that's directly impacting your bottom line, that's helping you make money to basically pay for them. Otherwise, heck, what are they there for, right? I mean, that's the truth. If they're not generating money or not doing something significant for your business, for the growth of it, or to help save you money, or at the bare minimum, maybe you get to a point where you're making a lot of money and you just want to work less, and you're like, hey, I'll make less money, and you hire that person so they can fill a lot of my jobs and duties and tasks, well, then that's fine. That's money well spent, because now you've freed up your time and you can enjoy your life more. But payroll and expenses are going to be your top ones, and then you're going to have your utilities, your supplies, which you buy from your suppliers and things like that. And remember, just like rent, just like that, you can probably negotiate cheaper supplies if you buy in volume discounts, or, you become a regular customer and you say, hey, look, I'm going to buy, this stuff from you every single month or every quarter, and I want to negotiate a deal because I'm going to spend this much money with you every year. So let's get down to a price that you can still make money, because a deal has to be good for both companies. You can't get them down to where they make no money, but say, hey, look, I don't want you getting rich off me, for God's sake. You can't charge me all that money, but let's make it worth your time. You make your fair margins, and then that way I'm getting a good deal, and that way I won't leave you. I won't shop somewhere else for that same supplies, because if you end up getting overcharged, say like when you're making your business cards. I remember one time when I first got into business, the amount of money that I was paying per business card was astronomical. It was something like almost 7, 8, 10 cents a business card. But I loved it. It was color and it looked good. It's exactly what I wanted. But then I go to the next person, they're like, hey, I can do that for 5 cents. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have came to you first. And the next person was like 3 cents. The next person's 2 cents. You can get it so cheap depending on the volume that you buy. So these are tricks that you'll learn over time about how you can cut your expenses. But the bottom line is this. I'm glad you asked this question because you have to learn about how much your monthly expenses are going to be in your business. And then you're going to match that up against your projected sales and income. And that's where you're going to see how much meat there is on the bone, right? How much money you can actually make. If it's like, I can make this much money and I can get my expenses down here, look at that gap. Look at how much money's in here to be made, right? But what if like you're like, I can get my sales up here, but gosh, in order to get all this income coming in and all these sales, it's going to take this much in expenses, or it's going to take this much. And if there's no money or very little money, that's not a business you want to get into. So I hope this video has helped you guys out a lot. Keep watching these videos. I'll keep trying to deliver. Remember, be the hustler.